and we will turn it over to Alvin to talk to us about biosolids from an operator's perspective. Take it away. You should already have the power to share your
Okay.
um,
So I'm going to try this. I've never
slides.
actually shared anything before, so I'm not a normal speaker for NIWIA when it comes to this stuff. But let's see. So documents. How do I do
So
this?
right down in the middle of there should be a share button. And so you
Yep,
click
I've
on
got
that.
that. So I'm
It's
just
going
trying
to
to.
show everything that's open on your screen. So you
Okay.
click on the one that has your presentation in it.
Okay, so we have a few. So the first I can share with you is we did have a response to Anna Kellis's letter. I don't know, can you see that?
It says you've started, but it's a black screen. Oh, here it comes. It just took it a minute to pop up.
Okay,
But
so I mean, I can share this and I can send this. I mean, I know you guys had reached out a little bit more to talk about the finances of the situation, but just kind of giving a review. So, New York Water Environment Association, myself, so I am a land applier. You have a little background about me. So, I'm an avid outdoorsman, fly fisherman. I am a avid conservationist. So, one of the questions I get a lot of times because we're a land applier, why do we do it? You know, knowing that I'm a conservationist. And it's not as bad as everybody thinks. I also grew up on a dairy farm. We need the nutrients that are in the biosolids to help these farms grow. We're not using it for human consumption for mine. Just giving you a little bit of background. Like I said, I'm not normally the guy that speaks on these. So this is the NIWIA's response to Anna Kellis's letter. And it just kind of gives you a couple of views like what NIWIA as an organization stands for when it comes to that, because she had some things that we feel were a little off basis from our science, which I think when you look at the science behind whether biosolids should be land applied or not, the biggest concern is PFAS or PFOSs that are in the biosolids. And there's been different studies done, but as you look at different ones, it's what's going to happen. From an operator's perspective, my biggest challenge is first, we look at the DEC's new guidance on land application, and it's one of the most stringent in the country, which is going to put us at roughly, I think it's 20 parts per trillion that they'll have to be. And I believe on my other slideshow, it may actually tell us the exact numbers on that. And I will make sure that these all get shared with you. I know I did email Roxy both of them ahead of time,
they
but
are in the packet.
okay, so
They have
yes,
it.
so you can kind of follow a line up here or there, but this is kind of Naiwia's response to her letter. And I'm a member of that, but I'm not the technical guy. I'm the guy that runs the plan every day. And for the biggest concern for me is one, if we were to stop tomorrow, if they went through and passed the legislation for the potential biosolids ban, not just plants like myself, but every plant in the state, we would have a difficulty finding landfills that would take them. Right now, there are limits on landfills that can take only so much biosolids. So as they go to take more, there's a limit. But the other thing is it's going to drive the price. We've heard anywhere from doubling of price to 300% of ton per ton price for the landfill. Want to go to my, see if I can do this. Stop sharing this and then share.
You're like a professional, Alvin.
Yeah, I'm getting there. We're going to work it through. Let's see. I got to open it on my desk. Okay, that's how that works. Close that one. And you can ask me questions as we're going through this. Um, so let's see. Open. Okay. So now let me go to here. And I apologize, guys.
You're fine.
Okay. Back to full screen. There we go. And share. Now we have that. And let me know if that started.
Yes. It's not in presentation mode, but you can do that
So
in
I
the
can just
screen.
scroll it down through. You can see it.
We can see it, but if you go up to the upper left-hand corner, I guess, you should have the movie screen, the pull-down screen up there. Yes, PowerPoint, it's save, it's back. Just, do you see
I think
that?
I'm going to have to scroll. I'm not sure how. Like I
Okay,
said,
that's fine.
I
That's fine.
apologize because I have never done that before.
You're
Um,
fine.
so as we're kind of looking at we look at the DEC as doing a good job on regulating the biosolids in the industry, and we'd kind of like to keep it there. So the big push that's going on right now, with good cause, PLOF and PFAS are very big concern chemicals. And me as an operator, as an outdoorsman, as a person that lives in New York, is concerned about this. So the first thing that I think of is that we need limits on our biosolids. So as a land applier, limits are important. And that's something that the DEC is starting to do for us. So as we look for the regulatory landscape, and you guys can see the next slide as I scroll like
Mm-hmm.
this. Okay.
Yes.
Um, so this kind of shows us what's going on across the country. This was put together by Hazen and Sawyer, an engineer, probably a better speaker than me. So like I said, I do apologize for that. But we're looking at what's going on throughout the country, places that have land application, that are taking solids. So this kind of shows you the country. The next one. Let's go down. Okay, well, too fast. There we go. So number three, we can see where New York's land application guidance levels monitor, require, influent biosolids. Got to move that. There we go. Biosolids, land application limits, guidance, monitor, require, and influent effluent biosolids industrial pretreatment program initiative requiring PFAS pretreatment for industrial discharges. So that's kind of like we're the going to be, once all this comes through, the most stringent in the country. So we look at Michigan's model, which was one that did this. And I don't know if you guys want me to go through all of this stuff, but I can kind of go through it a little bit because I'm told you guys have some pretty good knowledge of what's going on with the biosolids and questions. The big thing here is that, there's a lot of places that do have biosolids. So they looked at no restrictions at less than 20 parts per billion, restrictions at between 20 and 50, you're going to have to do sampling. We've got to get it below that 20 is where you want it to be. With that, anything over the 50, they're going to prohibit the recycling until PFO and POS are below the 20 parts per billion. The technical operation guidance series, which is what my stance as an operator and also what the NIWIA stance is. Like I said before, we're looking to the DEC to guide us, and knowing that they're finally getting this out there and going to do the guidance and set these limits, it makes me feel better and it makes everybody better. And we prefer that the professionals in the science make the rules and not just the lawmakers. They have the whole technical series, and when it comes to the PTO, the reaches the priority status, the department will propose a modification to the speedies permit in accordance with the established procedures and guidance. This modification may include additional monitoring, action levels, minimizing the program, tracking it down. One of the things for these sources, what we want to do is we also encourage point source. So we're trying to get out and sample them at the source. So once you get a high result, we're testing our influent, we're testing our enfluent, we're testing our biosolids. And what we're trying to do is find where these levels are coming in at a high level. So that is one of the things we're looking at, and we're finally getting, once this technical operations guidance comes through, this TOGS, it'll give us the power to be able to go through and be able to actually enforce these laws with industries in our area to kind of get it taken out of our stream coming in. Examples in Michigan when they did this by looking at the industries that were polluting. So when you kind of look at this, they've had a huge reduction by going at the point source of what was in their biosolids by removing it. So we'll say, for my community, Remington Arms was a gun manufacturer. They are now out of business, but let's just say I had DuPont come in and they're going to do a clothing company there, and I'm going to be getting in a lot of high POFSs in this case. I can put permit limits on them when these TOGs pass to eliminate that coming into my facility. Now my biosolids will not have that pass through and be going out onto our land application. So that's kind of the idea of what we're trying to get with the new TOGs. That's what it's going to do. These are the real results that happened in 2023 in Michigan. So the DMM7, DMM7A, which is the draft, and the TOGS 1.314 takeaways. New York has implemented the most productive tiered biosolids land application program in the United States. New York has implemented an approach to reduce the emerging contaminants through this IPP, which places the burden of compliance on the polluters. Like I said, that's huge, especially every person in this call is a taxpayer, is a ratepayer, is a sewer user, whether you have a septic tank and you're having your tank pumped out, we all are going to be paying this. So why should we be paying for what an industry is polluting and they shouldn't be polluting. But that's what this does. Shifts the burden from us onto the ones that are actually creating it. The draft DMM7 and TOX promote science-based decision making, and that's one of the big things that we think is it's based on science that's happened. So that is kind of the big takeaway when we look at what's going on for the TOGs out there and what we're hoping to have happen there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then look at everybody. Um, so from there, the biggest problem I see with the biosolids land application is, there's a lot of bad talk about it. It does a lot for the soils, a lot of your roads. So Endicott, which isn't very far from you down by the Binghamton area, all their biosolids are Class A, but what they do with them, they give them to the state of New York and they're used in road remediation. Some of the other places that we get them used in is for biosolids are used at landfills to put on the cover. But the problem with biosolids in the landfills are the landfills get full very good. And they have a lot of phosphorus and nutrients in these for non-human, like my biosolids go for ethanol. Corn for ethanol is what it's used to grow. We have to add there's an awful lot of permit levels that we have to go through, a lot of different testing that we do twice a month. So every 3 loads of biosolids we're required to test. This is going to make us, I believe the new will probably be every load of biosolids are going to be tested or every other, depending on the scale of how large that is. So for my plant in particular, I produce roughly 20 yards. So that's about 18 tons of biosolids every other day. So when you kind of think of the problem, if they were to shut off me from land applying. So the other problem I have is my permit only allows, which any plant that land applies, the DEC came to my permit and told me 20 years ago, you need to land apply because there's not enough space in our landfills and we want to close incinerators. So at the time, I think 18% of the state had incinerators. We have 3 incinerators left. So you only have a few ways you can get rid of biosolids. You can land apply, you can incinerate, or you can take it to a landfill. And our landfills are filling up fast. So that is a problem. That's not necessarily the solution. There are a few other ideas that we would like to see more research and have federal and or state funding on are both pyrolysis and gasification. They look promising, but we need to see that more. I would like to see facilities go down that road. Both NIWEA and myself have looked in those, but we still need some more data. It looks promising, but it's all at pilot level studies. We need to see something that's going to be put out there at a much larger task. There's another way that you can help limit your biosolids. You can add dryers. So dryers are great. You can go down from an average biosolids cake is going to be anywhere from 20% to 29 to 35% on. I'm an exception. I'm in that higher 30s, but a lot of them are more in that 20, mid 20%, and you can get that up into the 90% with dryers. The problem with dryers is they do not remove PFOS or PFOA. So you still leave that. You do remove a lot of the solids, but they're awful energy intensive. So as we're looking to go green across the state, one of the problems that you're having is using more energy, and we're not set up for green technology right now. It's not a very green process. Where pyrolysis or gasification, once the process is started, then it uses the heat from the biosolids to keep that process going. Excuse me. So those are a couple of the things. As far as the numbers go, right now, the landfill that I would have to go to, I land apply. I pay $56 a ton. They come and pick it up. If I were to ship tomorrow to our land, just our regular landfill, they're going to charge me $120 to take my biosolids there. Then on top of that, then I'm going to also have to find a hauler, which right now, depending on if everybody's looking for a new hauler, is going to be roughly another $25 a ton. So for my budget, I'm going to be looking at about another $280,000 a year when I was only spending $140,000 a year for biosolids. Excuse me. That's what I budgeted. I don't quite spend that a year, but we're looking at real-time numbers of what we would spend is anywhere from 280,000 upwards to 500,000. And my plant budget's a $1.8 million budget. So that would be a huge, huge undertaking, and it'd be paid by all my ratepayers. And that's kind of what I'm here to talk about, I guess. And I think maybe this would be a good time for questions. Sorry if I ramble.
No, thank you so much. It's very interesting. Um, Questions? Yes, Charlie.
Okay. Very good presentation. Very interesting. Question is, when you do your testing, you're saying, I think you said you test periodically. I can't remember if it was every other or
So we test every other week. So,
every
but
other
I
week.
run six. So basically, out of six loads, I'm testing one of every six loads.
Okay. Just curiosity is how much variation do you see from load to load? Is
We
it
be
significant?
my Now my plant is unique to me, so not every wastewater plant is the same. But
Yep.
for me, I in the summertime, I'll see a little bit more variation because we take in more hauled in septic. But as far as for PF, for my plant, for PFOS, I think we were at like six when we've tested for those. But for other metals, that you can see a little bit increase in the summertime and then decrease in the wintertime because we're not taking in as much outside hauled in waste in the wintertime. But
Okay.
overall, I mean, for my facility, which I can't speak for others, we
Yep.
don't have that much of a variation. And I
Right.
think overall you would see the same. You may see a seasonal variation more than anything.
Sure. Okay. And then the other question is, let's say for your facility, um, if you had to just a ballpark estimate, industrial versus non-industrial contribution to PFAS and PFOS, any sense of how that split would go?
So the only source I have of PFAS is from the landfill, which because unfortunately, Herkimer County is no longer an industrial hub. I started here 25 years ago. Yeah, it's even
Right.
longer than that now, but we had 29 industrial users. I
Mhm.
have to do an annual pre-treatment report, and I just did my last one, and my last industrial user notified me in January they will be closing down. So
Mhm.
now the only thing I have left is a landfill leachate, and they bring in 20,000 gallons a day. This one, for me, I'm fortunate because they closed in 1984. So their standards actually are tighter than their leachate has better than some of the drinking water in our area for PFOAS. So
Mhm.
that's just because of, I think it's the age of what I've learned if I see the older, which I didn't know this, but when I've seen older landfills, they don't seem to have that are closed and capped. They don't seem to have the high PFAS numbers as our new landfills and active working landfills. They're the
Mhm.
harder ones that are more of concern.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Alvin, I have a question. Um, you were talking about limiting biosolids. Um, are dryers the only method of limiting the biosolids?
So there are a couple methods. So you can also digest your sludge. So digesters, though, are that's a very large capital investment. So, like, we looked at a study for mine, and it's based on what's coming into your plant, but then you also need enough biology coming in. So, to be able to do that. So, my plant really didn't have that. But for my small plant, which is a 6.1 MGD plant, not small, but it's what we would call a small large plant. With that, we would have to have it was at the time, which was 4 years ago, it was looking like a $25 million dollar upgrade. Today, I dare say I'm looking at a plant upgrade that does not include digesters that's going to be close to 100 million, which was smaller than that. So that would be a bigger number. So there are other ways. The dryer is probably the best. Like I said, gasification and pyrolysis also reduces that, but it also makes the biosolids inert. But that is emerging technology and it is not completely proven, but we're trying. My hope is that it gets out there and gets proven. And once that does, that is one of the things that they're saying is about 99% destruction of PFOS and PFOA for the contaminants that they're currently looking for. So but that is, like I said, emerging. I think it's coming around. I know Pennsylvania, I believe, just had some places come online. Australia has 4 plants online, and British Columbia just had a place come online. But we don't have any in New York. And as far as I know, that we don't have any current pilot studies. I tried to do a pilot study here at the plant, but I happen to be in environmental justice area. And because they do air pollution a little bit, so with that, anything in an environmental justice, even if it would meet the air quality standards, you can't bring in. And it was more so not from the pyrolysis, it was the truck traffic to do it. So we could not go down that path.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm not the most scientific guy. Like I said, I'm an operator. I can tell you what we do. So, I mean, and if you have other questions more in detail about data numbers or something, I can definitely reach out to the best guys for that. But any questions, like I said, I know the finances are kind of the big thing for a lot of people or a lot of the plants. And some plants, biosolids disposal are 50% of their budgets, especially the small ones. That becomes a huge issue for them.
I have a question. I actually forgot my first question. Hopefully, I'll remember that in a minute. The togs that you were referring to,
Yes.
um, then, so I know you were giving a Michigan example, but were those New York State's togs?
Yes, the TOGs are
Okay.
New York
Um,
State TOGs. I believe those are set to be passed or approved by the DEC. And then DMM 7A is the one we're waiting for them to, that was in draft. And we're hoping once they approve that, that'll streamline all this and get us because right now the ability is to enforce this at the industrial users end, which I'm hoping to bring users into my district. We all want to see our communities grow and thrive. But not with stuff like that. We want to be able to enforce those limits. If we don't have those, I can't enforce pre-treatment limits on them. So we really
okay.
need the DEC to put those limits out there so I can put them on industries. Is like I said, the old Remington site, I have people that are interested in doing stuff there, and I have to be able to tell them, hey, here's what our limits are. I tell them this is what I'm going to try, what we're hoping they're going to be right now, but if they don't get those approved, I can't enforce them.
So the togs they aren't approved yet, is what you're saying.
So the tags are not they may have been last week. There's a lot of stuff goes on in January. So there's stuff going on there and the DMM 7, I know this week and next week there's going to be approvals of other things next week. So I'm hoping that
Okay.
they'll be done. I think I had what is Wednesday the 3rd. They're supposed to be talking to us at 1 p.m. on what's going to be approved. So
Okay. And my first question, you actually said it. I was wondering how you were gonna regulate the users, and so it's through your pre-treatment program.
Yes, yep,
So, so that is only for industrial users,
correct.
right? That's what it is.
Yes.
So that gets back to Charlie's question about sources from clothing and rubber tires, or our car tires, the stormwater
So,
runoff. It will, okay, you're not supposed to have stormwater
yep.
runoff. I guess if you have
Yeah, so
infiltration, then that could be a problem.
right, yeah, I guess from the tires, I'm not sure how much, what the data is on getting it off the tires. I mean, it's in, unfortunately, it is in everything we have. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm wearing a sweatshirt. I'm sure it's probably in that, your Teflon
yeah,
coating. I mean, actually, after learning about this, I mean, I always loved my cast iron, but now I cook on that and stainless steel. I got rid of all the other things in the house, as
yeah.
silly as that may sound.
No, we
But
did that.
no, so what we can do if we're having high levels, we can go back to the sewers out in the streets, what our plans for every plant that I talk to, because we have to track it down. So maybe it's not an industrial user, but it could be the car wash down the street. That's one of the things that we're
Hmm.
hoping that we can go in and, if their car wash is having stuff, because some of the waxes. One of the things,
Hmm.
so I was in Albany yesterday that we're trying to get the legislation to pass, which really would help us, is a point source ban. So that means banning
Hmm.
PFOs altogether, any of those chemicals right from the manufacturing, right from the start. So they can't be manufactured. Unfortunately, what's already out there, we can't really do anything about. I know that some of the stuff you can't buy out of from in New York anymore that does have it. If it was Gore-Tex equipment, being an outdoorsman, you have, rain gear. They've outlawed that rain gear to be bought in New York. So they are doing some stuff, but they need to do more. One of the biggest one is our cooking ware. That's one of the big pushes because I didn't realize how much that is in our cooking ware. That the food we eat, what we cook with is cooked in. That's what it's coating. That's what makes everything slippery. Then
Hmm.
the other, and I am a cross country skier, but we are looking to
Yeah.
go after the waxes because that's another one. I was at a meeting maybe a few years ago when I started hearing about this, and they had talked about, we're looking at the biosolids, and they said they took a sample of the like we'll say in my area, there's a mountain called McCully Mountain. And they took a sample of not necessarily that ski mountain, but one of the ski mountains in their area, and it was over 1,000 times higher than what the proposed limits are on our biosolids
Wow.
because of all the wax on the skis. So that one has really got me intrigued and thinking, how bad are our ski mountains? Not to get off topic, but and then all the runoff. Like I said, I'm an avid outdoorsman. I fly fish, and these mountains are always coming down into my streams. So I'm thinking of
Right.
this stuff all the time.
Right. Well, it's complex. That's why we're having several different speakers talk on this topic because there's a lot to think about with
Yes.
biosolids. Um, any other questions?
Beyond New York, I see one of the questions in there is there a product working on point? I can't answer that. I'm assuming there is. I am only involved in the New York level. So for us, we are just trying to work on it here in New York for this, at least for New York water environment.
Oh, thanks so much. Actually, was the question is more about is there a coalition that NIWEA is working with at the state level on that point source ban? And I'm just
So
yeah, I'm curious who local partners might look to if we want to be engaged in that sort of
yeah, okay,
activity.
okay. I can give you the list because I was there yesterday. Let me pull it up on my phone. So one of them is Citizens Campaign. Let's see. So we were all down there in Albany yesterday, and I'll show up. Let me see. Hold on. I gotta. So let's see. So we had the Sierra Club, the Atlantic chapter of them, um, Environmental Advocates of New York, Riverkeeper, Interstate Environmental Commission, Earth Justice, although they talk with us, they don't usually show up, but they are on that coalition for banning that. The Nature Conservatory, Long Island Water Conference, and one of the big supporters, not of the biosol, but of the point source ban is also the New York League of Conservation Voters, and also the New York Water Environment, or not New, um, the water. So Roxy, who's your water association?
Oh,
AWWA.
AWWA. Yeah,
Yes, and they were there with
American
us
Water
yesterday.
Works.
Yes, so
Yeah.
Jenny was down there yesterday,
Okay, yeah.
and the Adirondack Council. Sorry, I forgot them. They're a very large voice.
That's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I think I have this right. I think Senator Leah Webb has introduced and maybe passed some legislation banning PFAS compounds in some
So
household
there are
products and
some that are banned. Yes, we did that,
okay.
which that we believe was help from our coalition over the last few years, but not all of them. That's the problem. We need it. We need a complete ban.
So is she participating in some of your discussions or
I was not in her group yesterday, but she
okay.
does participate, and I
Okay.
believe she is on board with the full ban. But it is a challenge down there because they do look at, you have to look at the economy of things for them. It's a bigger, I guess, being a conservationist, I look at, my issues, but I also have to think of the sweat, of everything that goes into it for them, sewer, water, electric, transportation, and, what makes the economy run. And that's part of where the difficulty comes in. Their biggest pushback, I'm told, is from the food industry,
Like packaging?
both packaging and the cookware.
Mm.
And nobody really wants to my feel, which this is just me, and that's not speaking as just from talking with people, is that's intimidating for them to try to go down that road. That's a very large dollar amount to change that industry. So if we were the ones to do it, that's very costly. So I think they're worried about that.
Mm.
What the effects on the consumer, on the industry. So I think that's one of their concerns.
Interesting. Um, any other questions for Alvin? Oh, I didn't give you a chance to raise your hands. Here's one I had, and you've hit on this indirectly a couple times, and I think the letter addresses this topic where there could be limits placed on biosolids that would not cause so much hardship for plants that they wouldn't cause such a budget hit for plants with their biosolids handling. Um, and those limits would be effectively kind of at background level of PFAS in the environment, right? So I'm not saying that very well. So you could meet limits that might be essentially what's in there in the environment now, right?
Correct.
Is that believable? Okay.
That is believable from what we're seeing in some of the science data that we've gotten is that they're showing that the background levels are right in that era or in that order. Like I said, I'm not the technical guy, but what we're seeing is that they are right around the same levels. Or, I mean, sometimes somebody's yard out front, like you mentioned, the tires, you're doing washing your
Yeah.
car in your driveway, your lawn in front of your house or the side of where you're doing that may actually hold more PFAS than we're going to put in our biosolids, which they have shown that that's the case. Not always, but there's that potential depending on what's going on in that area.
So when you
And
talk, and I see you, Charlie, but so when you talk about having to balance different considerations, um, you're saying NIWEA is saying that it could be feasible for wastewater plants to lower um, their PFAS and their biosolids to a level where you're essentially recycling them in the environment instead of increasing the levels, and not thinking about bioaccumulation at the moment,
right.
and kind of holding steady, or you might even be less than some areas until such
Yeah,
time as we have the technology to start, well, first banning them as
right.
soon as possible, and then for the ones that exist, the technology to break them down, which probably will come through the wastewater plants, basically, to
Right.
remove what's out there.
So yes, I think what we can do is if you look at point source, NIWEA stances, the point source is the key to that because then we can go in, track it down. So as we looked, the Michigan example shows that, they were having very high numbers. Now, not every municipality, like you mentioned, I don't take much industry. So there's other municipalities
Right.
that this may not work, and those plants can't go to land application. They shouldn't. But for a facility such as mine, or there's a little facility that I also know of, Manoa, out in the Syracuse area, their facility goes land application. So, or Endicott, for example, that gives theirs to the Department of New York State Transportation
Mm-hmm.
that uses it out on roads. You look at some of those places and we can meet the limits there. And if we're seeing higher numbers, we can go out and do that point source inspection, figure out where it's coming from, stop it there at the source. Then we can go back out and check this out and see what's going on. And now, back before my time as an operator in the 80s and then finally in the 90s, we did a program through the industrial pretreatment program called a mercury minimization program,
Mm.
and they were very successful. This was a very similar problem, and we went which a much worse problem in my opinion. And granted, because it was coming out in the biosolids and it was coming out in your streams, or excuse me, in our effluent out into the rivers in the waterways. So we did that successfully. It took many years to see that decline, but now today, I mean, we have mercury levels. I think my highest for my plant, where I can look back data wise, before we started doing this, we were like,
Mm-hmm.
say, 100 nanograms. Now I'm less than zero point 0.6 nanograms of mercury. So it was a dramatic increase. But, biggest source for them was easy. It was a lot of all industrial users, and then dental became the last, and we still do dental inspections. And now that they don't, for the most part, people don't do amalgam fillings, we feel that like in the future, that mercury minimization plan in another 20 years will be gone because everybody with the dental fillings that were amalgam will be gone. At some point. But the hope is that this could be the same idea with the POFS and POFOA. And there's other emerging contaminants coming out.
Mm-hmm.
We worry about the
Right.
microplastics. That's going to be the DEC's next question. They've seen, so we talk about the health effects a little bit about PFOS and POFOA. We're not sure what those limits are for health, but we know the
Mm-hmm.
microplastic limits are much lower. So, and they may be a bigger concern as we go forward, is what we're hearing also. So this is just, like I said, this is not going to be the last thing we're going to be looking at. It's going to be the first of many, not even the first, just one of the next things. And then I see we had another
Yeah.
question.
Charlie.
Yeah, thanks. I I I like the ideas of limiting point source and doing measurements and control over the biosolids that are placed, let's say, in agricultural fields. One of the questions I have is you're measuring the biosol or the PFAS and PFOS in the biosolids, but if you deposit that on the same field month after month, year after year, will it accumulate? And is anybody monitoring the soil itself and putting
So
some kind of limit on the soil level so that once you reach a certain level in the soil, then that throws up maybe another flag? Because as I understand, they are forever chemicals, and
right.
once you put them on the field, they really either they're going to stay in the soil or they're going to move down into a watershed somewhere. But likely they'll probably stay there mostly, I would guess. But any
So
thoughts on that?
So one of the thoughts too is first question I'll go back to is the forever chemical. We say forever, but we're not sure. The data doesn't know what forever means. Does it mean forever for 1,000 years, 100 years, or like the question is they say that these chemicals were put in the 1950s is when they started being produced,
Mhm.
and then why are we seeing low levels in closed cap landfills? So that's just a question. I'm not the science guy, but that makes me question what do they mean? Is
Oh,
it going to, so has it leached out? Does it stay
let's
forever?
let's
That's a,
set aside the word forever. I
yeah.
mean, but they do
But
have a they're
yes,
very stable material.
yes,
They have a very long life.
yes,
And
they do.
so my question is still, I think,
Oh, so what we
because
have,
of that, what is the implication of on the soil itself in terms of accumulating after applying, even with a lower limit, I guess is my question.
so we are heavily, so myself, the guy that applies ours, they're heavily regulated. So they have a land application rate. So they have to spread at a certain rate and it can't exceed whatever the DEC, based on our analysis, the DEC gives you. So our waste, our biosolids waste profile is what they'll call it. And they're going to look at that and they're going to say, okay, here is where you're, then they're going to look at the soil that's there. They sample that. And like I said, I'm not the most technical guy, but this is what kind of what they do is they look at the soil and that rate, and they look at what nutrients are there and how much that soil needs for nutrients and what metal contaminants are still there, what POF is there, and then they give us a rate to allow there. And then you have to sample, got a report. I can find it easily
Okay.
because
So
we have to do an annual report on these, and I'm just trying to see. I,
I think you're answering my question is not only
but
do they have to test the biosolids that are applied to the soil, but they also have to test the soil itself for
yes.
PFAS.
Yeah, and it's, I
Sure that,
want to say it's once a month every year.
yeah.
So they have to, so wherever they're land applying, if
I
they put
assume
it on,
there's some kind of limit there in terms of the content in the soil itself.
yes. Yeah. So
Exceed a
they
certain
do
level.
a, basically they do a baseline prior, then we have to test it. And I believe it's once you start land applying, you have to test every month for a period of time. And I don't know the number of years that you have to continue to test. I
Okay.
can't, I don't know that answer though.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Another question, Darby?
Yeah, thanks. I have a question about the testing. Who does it? Like, what labs are out there? Do you have the capacity
So
to do that?
no, so my facility, no, I don't believe any of our, for biosolids, well, the PFAS, let's put it this way,
The
none of
PFAS,
us,
yeah,
yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
none of us have that testing.
Yeah.
The state and I did back-to-back samplings. So the state, the DEC is doing their own sets. My facility, I use my own lab or a contracted lab. We use Pace Analytical. They're a local company. For us, well, I don't know how local, but they're a company that we can send our samples out to. The test, the other thing is tests are very, very expensive right now at this time.
Yeah.
That's our hard hit for us is the land appliers. Like I said, if we have to test every load, it's $600 a test, so we're gonna have to figure out how to manage that in the end. But we do not test our own, but I have done split samples just to see. And even in a split sample, I've seen varying results largely. When the DEC and I tested, our results were nowhere in the same ballpark. I mean, 2 pages completely different. It was, which scares me because the methods, they're learning how to do these tests in the labs, and the analytical methods are not as accurate as they, I think they're getting more accurate, but once they finally came up with a method, the EPA, once they gave that method, we've seen things get a lot tighter.
Right. And that's exactly why I wanted to ask this question is that there are very limited labs to do this. And because of all the environmental uh, inputs, or, you just washed your hands with some kind of soap that had PFAS in it, or
Yep.
you just got finished flossing your teeth and that somehow contaminates the,
Yep. So
the
like when we go to
sample.
take, you go to take that sample, and that was part of the thing with the DEC that day. So they came here, they came to my plant because we do a very good sampling program. So they wanted to learn how to sample in our region for this. So we went through, and those guys had taken a shower this morning. You can't take a shower. You can't brush your teeth. You can't put deodorant on. I can't wear this sweatshirt. I can't wear the pants I'm wearing, the boots that I have on. You have to look at, because low up, and that's how low of a sample we're trying to get, and it can skew it that level. And that's where I think part of that sample was, where I was wearing the proper clothing, didn't groom myself that day. You just, those are part of the things you have to do, which is, how do we get that more easy to do is a question that we're trying to grapple with, but also makes, I guess, think of the reality of every day we're coming in that much contact with this, so is that, so is the biosolids there at that concern level when we have more on us right now than what I'm going to test for in my biosolids? That's the other thought that comes to mind there. I guess I never thought about that till I just said it. When you have to do all that and I'm testing, and if my clothes rub up against that, the sample will be blown. I mean, because it's that high on your clothes.
Thanks.
And then Cynthia?
Hi, thank you for the conversation. To Charlie's point, I think he raises a good question about the accumulation and testing of PFAS in the fields. As far as I'm aware, currently there is no testing regimen for the fields. I don't know if we know what the background levels in the soil are. And then if we add the consideration of PFAS in tires, of course, these are agricultural fields where we've got tractors and lots of
Yep.
heavy equipment running through the fields constantly. I think that's something that needs due attention. Understanding what the background levels are in our agricultural fields who have not had land application of biosolids, those who have land application of biosolids, and then how they're monitored and tested and regulated going forward, because I'm unaware of current regulations on or testing of land that is receiving biosolids.
So like for me right now, so here is my annual land application report that we have to do. So anybody that's going to land apply has to apply through both the DEC and the EPA. And then, like I said, the first thing they do is you're going to have to do a background sample on that land as part of that application process. So
But does that background sample test for PFAS?
That tests for everything. I don't think it used to. Let's put it that way. So we don't know what was there, like the site that I'm going. I mean, we've been going to this farm that's, 20,000 acres. We started going land applying in, I think it was 2002. The DEC, we didn't have a choice. We were required to by the DEC. Sorry about the phone. So that was a permit limit that was put on to us, and we were one of the chosen few that said, okay, you're going to land apply based on our data from our sludge back when they were doing that. They're like, okay, you guys are good facility for the land application that we're trying to do, because they were trying to eliminate at that time, like I said, the big thing was the air concern, and they were trying to eliminate incineration, and they couldn't just keep sending stuff to the landfills because that would have made a crisis at that time. So the way I understood it is they came around looking at plants and looked at their biosolids and figured out who had good biosolids for nitrogen and phosphorus to put back in the soil to remediate it after years of being grown on. I don't know if that answers your question or not. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I've been looking at these annual reports. I believe the DEC's database online stops at like 2022 or 2023. So I don't have the newest report. So I appreciate you sharing that with me. Thank you so much.
And so the other thing, so the land application reports are managed by the EPA, so over the DEC. The DEC also gets them and they step in. So, and depending on your region, so you're region 7, am I correct on that? Yes.
Yes.
So that's where the DEC office there is the guy, I think it's Ryan. I can't remember what Ryan's last name is, but I know it's Ryan. He's the head of the land application in that area. So he would probably be able to get you more data like, okay, what farms are taking land application in your county, how many, or in Region 7 or your town. They should be able to tell you exactly, and they can tell you, you may have to foil it. The DC gets funky about that, but you can still get the information.
Thank you. I at least based on the New York State database, I did not see any in Region 7. There was a
Okay.
couple in Cayuga County, because of course this is CWIO, so we're looking at the whole watershed, not
Yep.
just Tompkins County. But I was not aware that those records are with the EPA, so thank you for that.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Is there anything else for Alvin? Thank you very much for your time today. It's been super interesting, very helpful, exposing us to a whole nother viewpoint on biosolids. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the time to speak. And like I said, I'm sorry I'm not the best speaker, but I'm an
Fine.
operator. What can I say?
You're completely fine.